Hello, I'm Joel.
And I'm Alex.
Welcome to the Commander's Journey, the place where we discuss our favorite format of Magic, Commander, from the perspective of a new player
and an experienced one.
And this journey is for new Magic players interested in Commander. And here we go. We got another deck tech for you. We're doing Atraxa, Praetor's Voice. It's great because Double Masters just came out. And, of course, everybody's looking for that new Atraxa box topper. But they reprinted this girl, and she is nasty. Is she not?
She is definitely, of almost all the commanders that exist, she's one of the go-to salty. And it's the one that you still see a lot, even though people have such a high salt level with it. Because she does so many things. You can make so many different kinds of decks with her.
Yeah, I think the most popular ones a lot of people do are either the Infect, deck, or the Super Friends Planeswalker deck. But you chose to go with the +1/+1 counter theme, right?
Yeah, so this one is interesting. This is actually the first deck I ever got for Commander. I started playing right when 2016 was coming out. I got Atraxa for a not terrible price like it had become. I got pretty lucky in that regard.
No, so not for like 40 or 60
No,
bucks.
I got it. No, I'm about to say at the time period, I think I got it for $10 over. Like it was $30 average deck, I think, at that time period. And I think I got it for 40, so it was a hair more expensive.
For the whole deck.
But for the whole deck, right?
Yeah.
And now it's like, I think 110, 120.
I spent $40, several months ago just on Atraxa.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That one card is now worth the entire price of the deck. Not only that, but when I got the deck, and when I didn't realize how big a steal it was. I had just started playing Commander. I used to just play Draft and Sealed pretty much exclusively, the occasional Standard game.
Yep.
But my friends all told me I'd like Commander, and I got Atraxa when it came out.
You got attracted to Commander through Atraxa. Anyways, let me read this card for you, for those of you who don't know, which is probably not that many. But it's Atraxa, Praetor's Voice, a green, a white, a blue, and a black for what's the name of that? Wishmaw or Witchmaw?
Oh, what?
The four color.
I believe it's Witchmaw, but Witchmaw. Don't quote me on that. I played again after the Nephilim based on this. I thought it was a cool name. I think it was.
So she's a legendary creature, Angel Horror. She's got flying, Vigilance, Death Touch, and Lifelink. And at the beginning of your instep, you proliferate. She's a 4/4. Now, proliferate, for those of you who don't know, it is you choose any number of permanents and or players with counters on them, and then give each another counter of a kind already there. And that's the reason why I think Infect was so popular, because you can give you can hit something with Infect and then just keep proliferating them till you kill them. And the Planeswalkers with their loyalty abilities, but with the +1/+1 counter theme, which you got going on here, I've played against this deck, and I barely stand a chance against this deck when I leave tune this thing pretty well. The +1/+1 counter.
This one's a little more too, not terribly more than our other decks that we do. It's a little more that I know when I was budgeting for the deck, I'm a hair over 250. We decided to let it fly for this one.
Yeah.
But mainly what, with Atraxa is, again, I didn't change it much from the original purpose of the deck. The original deck was a +1/+1 counter deck.
Yes.
I, especially as a newer player, didn't want to lose what that initial deck did, so I didn't change it to a Super Friends. I didn't adjust it. I've been swapping out cards over the last 4 years since it came out, and, this is where it kind of has ended up.
So how do you want to win with this, then, if you're just like +1/+1, build everything up?
That's pretty much it. You go in for the big swing, you'll just naturally, it's so crazy how fast this deck puts +1/+1 counters on things and how many benefits you get from doing that. That'll fuel the whole rest of the deck. And then you'll swing in big with some big +1/+1 counter stuff.
All right, so let's get the first part of the episode. So talk about the best synergistic game plan cards that you have going on here. So this first one is Corpse Jack Menace. It's 2 a black and a green for a creature fungus. If one or more +1/+1 counters would be placed on a creature you control, twice that many +1/+1 counters are placed on it instead. It's a 4/4.
Yeah, this is just, when it comes to +1/+1 counters, let's double it. Let's get more and more ridiculous. Most of these good game plan cards are really the big powerhouse, +1/+1 counter stuff. But honestly, I had to narrow it down to 5 cards. That was hard to do. Everything in this deck generally helps that theme out or really, moves it forward. And you really see the benefits here.
And this next one is a classic. It's a great card. It's Cathars Crusade. For 3 a white and a white, it's an enchantment that whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control.
Straightforward. It's putting +1/+1 counters on things. It's making a lot really fast. Whenever you're playing a creature, you're getting that benefit.
And that's nice because if you have something that doesn't have the +1/+1, it's getting it, and then and Atraxa is helping you proliferate it, right?
Exactly, and it's more of that. There's a nice balance here between getting +1/+1 counters on things and proliferating.
And speaking of proliferating, Atraxa likes to do it at the end of every, at your instep, every turn. But if you can do it more often, how much better, right? So this next card, Inexorable Tide. I think I'm saying it right. It's 3 a blue and a blue for an enchantment that whenever you cast a spell, proliferate.
So this is just whenever you do anything, if that's not a land, you're proliferating. I mean, straightforward, helps with that thing. Again, this is the kind of thing that makes it just go off really fast.
Yeah, with a card like this out and just playing, I mean, you're proliferating while you're casting spells. At your instep, if you have Atraxa out, you're proliferating again. So you're just multiplying like crazy. And then this bad boy right here, these next two are also really good for your main game plan. It's Agave Guru of Spores. It's 2 black, green, and a white for a legendary creature, Fungus Shaman. Agave Guru of Spores enters the battlefield with 5 +1/+1 counters on it. And for 1, you can remove a +1/+1 counter from a creature you control and create a 1/1 green sapperling creature token. Or for 1, you can sacrifice a creature and put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. It comes in as a 0/0.
Yeah, and Gov's been in the game for a long time. He was in the original round of Commanders, I believe, the 2013 Commander decks when they first came out. I could be wrong, maybe it was 2012. I don't remember the year, but it's so synergistic with the rest of the deck. I can move counters around. I can turn them into tokens, so I can go wider if I need to instead of tall, or I can continue the going tall plan. And again, it just gets more and more ridiculous.
It's really nice. And himself, he's growing too the whole time at the same time. Because
exactly.
He comes with 5 counters on him, so you're just proliferating.
And again, there's so many game plan cards there. I just narrowed it down to 5. But honestly, if I wanted to, I could have done 20. I mean, it's
And
so many things help out the deck.
This next one you added in since then, because this is War of the Spark, Evolution Sage for 2 and a green. It's a creature elf druid that whenever a land enters the battlefield, under your control, you proliferate.
Same thing. And when I'm playing lands, I'm proliferating. When I'm casting spells, I'm proliferating. When at my end step, I'm proliferating. Everything I do, I want to proliferate.
That's what's fun. That's what's scary when I played against you. It's fun for you. It's scary for me because I was playing you, I think, 1-on-1, and it was impossible because you proliferate as you, like you said, every part of your turn.
Deck's a beast in the +1/+1 counter 1-on-1 game. Honestly, I've built in a couple weaknesses when we get that far. Specifically because it had a tendency, if I didn't do it, to take over and it'll be a little more power level than I intended. Though I will say, as our commander group gets a little more powerful, I may have to cut back on those weaknesses.
We're pretty casual, very casual play group, and I think you and I, we tend to play more casually. So on the casual spectrum, this is very competitive and fun. So not a very
exactly. Well, this is like most of our decks, I think, end up being a 6 or a 7 on the command zones tier list or a power level list. This one's 7 leaning towards 8, so it's on the top end of that to give you an idea of where it's at.
I think if you invest money like in your ramp and you invest in some other power cards, you could probably build it up.
Exactly.
So the next topic let's talk about, or the next section of the deck let's talk about is our best synergistic ramp cards. So this one we have Crystalline Crawler for 4 generic is an artifact creature construct with Converge. So a Crystalline Crawler enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each color of mana spent to cast it. And in this deck, that could be 4. Then you can remove a +1/+1 counter from Crystalline Crawler, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. And then you can tap it and put a +1/+1 counter on Crystalline Crawler. It's a 1/1.
So you're not using that last build very often, though you have it if you need it, which is still fantastic. Honestly, this thing gets out of hand so fast, you can pretty much single-handedly fuel the deck with this card alone if you kind of get it safely out there. I've been in situations where that's gotten to 12 in like a turn, and I just can start casting things for free by just removing the +1/+1 counters. I mean, it's scary how fast it goes off.
Yeah, this thing is just the more counters you put up on this thing, you just remove those counters to get your mana. That's nasty. That reminds me of a few other cards and some other colors that do this, but for this deck, that is great. And the fact that you can start it with 4.
Yes.
And Like basically, if you got Atraxa out, you drop this, you start for 4, and then at the end of the turn you're proliferating, you got 5 already. It's like a 4 for you pay 4, and you have a 5-drop mana rock.
Yes, already. And again, you haven't done anything. And again, with all the extra proliferate stuff, that just shoots right up if it doesn't get dealt with.
Another great ramp card in this deck is Jing Yang Wildcrafter. It's a Planeswalker. It's a 2 and a green for legendary Planeswalker, Yangu. Each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has tap, add 1 mana of any color. And his -1 is put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. He comes with 3 loyalty.
Yeah, so again, this one originally I had Rishkar Pima Renegade for a little while. I decided I like Jing Yang a little bit better.
Yeah.
I haven't played it too often since I added it to the deck, but it's definitely held its weight. And it's nice. It's a Planeswalker, so either it gets targeted, so I get to avoid a little damage.
Yes.
Or the opposite occurs. I get to keep it up as a static effect, and then I can also put +1/+1 counter things later on in the game.
A little bit harder to deal with because he's a Planeswalker, and you can add the counter. I think is helpful, right? If there's something I didn't get a counter like on Atraxa.
Exactly, right? Something that's a little bit farther behind. All of a sudden, you're not really behind anymore. You're right back to where you need to be and start proliferating.
Another great ramp card for this deck is Astral Cornucopia. It's XXX for an artifact, and no, that is not porn. It's just 3 X's.
God, Joel, I wasn't even going. I didn't. God,
it's just 3 X in the mana cost. For an artifact, Astral Cornucopia enters the battlefield with X charge counters on it. So tap it to choose a color, add 1 mana of that color to your mana pool for each charge counter on Astral Cornucopia. I wanted to clarify for new players, because this confused me as I started. There's 3 X's, right? So basically, if I paid 3 mana, that would be like 1 mana fits into each of those.
Exactly.
So it really only come in with 1 charge counter.
Exactly. So for every ×3 you spent, you get a charge counter, right? And you have to at least spend 3 mana on it.
Yes.
That's why there's 3 separate X's. You have to at least spend 3, and you can spend 5 on it. You still only end up with 1 counter. It doesn't do you really any good.
You have to get to 6.
You have to do by ×3. Yeah, exactly. Multiples of 3.
So on its own, it's not so great because it's 3 for 1 mana rock. But with Atraxa and being able to proliferate the heck out of this, it could be really nasty.
It pretty much is a 3 mana tap 1 mana rock, which is survivable. You're not ecstatic about it, but it gets the job done, right?
Yes.
And then when Atraxa's out, that'll become 2 and 3, and all of a sudden this can become tapped for 10 every turn, like some ridiculous number of any color, which is the key thing.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Pretty good. Here's another pretty good card for this deck. It's As Foretold.
Yes.
It's 2 and a blue. It's an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a time counter on As Foretold. And then once each turn, you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a spell you cast with a converted mana cost X or less, where X is the number of time counters on As Foretold.
So As Foretold takes a little bit to get going. Of course, with Proliferate, that'll speed up the timer on it. It's probably my favorite card in the deck. It's my pet card in it. Oh my
god.
And it really pulls its own weight after if you can get a round off with it kind of sneaking in.
It's an enchantment, and a lot of people, you'll notice at play, they have a lot of creature removal. They don't always have a lot of enchantment or permanent removal. So it's hard to deal with. But I want to explain this for new players how to use it. Once each turn you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a spell you cast with converted mana cost X or less. Now, reading it will explain it, but it could be a little bit difficult sometimes. So if you have 2 counters on this, basically, anything that is 2 mana or less, you can play for free.
Exactly.
And then the more counters you get on it, say you have 4 counters on it, then anything that costs 4 mana or less, you pay for free. This is insane because you can cheat so many things.
You can cheat so many things. Again, once per turn, so it can be during your opponent's turns. You get to play 1 thing for free, as well as 1 thing for free on your turns. The main issue with it, again, you have to go around once because it only comes up at the beginning of upkeep. So you have to kind of hope it doesn't get killed immediately. But even then, if it's the target of a removal spell, I don't mind that. It's 1 less removal spell my win conditions have to do. So either I get to play a bunch of stuff for free, or what generally happens, they don't realize how powerful the card is. All of a sudden, I'm at 4 or 5 time counters. I'm playing something huge every turn for free, especially if I have Leyline out or something like that. Then all of a sudden, they're like, oh, God, we got to get rid of this. This becomes like the number 1 removal target on the battlefield, which also allows Atraxa to go a little bit under the radar.
Exactly. Well, I mean, there's a way you can upgrade, right? If you get a Valkyrie Ori and you get ways to proliferate on other people's turns, you can get this on your first turn, you can drop it.
This deck originally did have Vidalcan Orrery. When I got the deck, that was, I think, one of the first purchases I did to upgrade the deck. I spent $20 to upgrade the deck at the time period. Vidalcan Orrery was like $5, and I think that was the most expensive card I paid for it. Like, it was just disgusting how cheap it was. And the only reason I put out Vidalcan Orrery is I only got one. I don't have a bunch of copies of Vidalcan Orrery. I have a bunch of ley lines, though, so this has blue. I threw ley line in the deck, but that's another easy upgrade that at one point was in this deck, and if I decided to put the power level back where I wanted to, I'd probably add that back in.
All right, let's get into card draw. So the best synergistic card draw cards here.
Yeah.
So this one's really good. I really like this. This is Soul Diviner. It's blue and a black for a creature zombie wizard. You tap it to remove a counter from an artifact, creature, land, or planeswalker you control. You draw a card. It's a 2/3.
Yes, so that one, too, is another addition from War of the Spark. War of the Spark had a lot of nice cards for this deck. I know I spent some time upgrading it with that in mind. But pretty much, when you're looking at Vidalcan, you'll just remove a +1/+1 counter. You'll get a free draw every turn. It's just pretty much a draw engine attached to a creature that you can use over and over again. And it's not like I have a great way to abuse it, but it's repeatable draw card effect, which is always nice.
Yeah, I mean, the Soul Diviner, if you have a way to untap and tap, that's just crazy. But either way, you have a creature out, you have something out that you're going to have plenty of counters running around.
You have so many counters.
This is like getting that extra card draw. You just tap this, get that extra card.
I can't tell you how many times I have, one of the Vivid Land Cycles, which is also in the deck out. Yeah. That's the counters on the lands. Honestly, I stopped counting them after the first 5 turns because usually my mana base is fine by that point.
And I'm sure you got a few ways to fix your mana in here as far as colors.
I have a lot of ways to fix the mana, but again, the Vivid Cycle is one of them. But of course, as I add more counters to it, there's a point where I don't even bother keeping attention to it because it's not relevant anymore with the different colors. But with that card, I can just steal it from the Vivids where I don't care about the +1/+1 counters at all, or the counters on it, and just sneak it off. Because you can attack land, or you take it from lands.
Yeah, and I mean, to pay 2 to get a creature that you're able to use this ability to tap it, even though you got to jump through the hoop of tapping, grabbing a counter.
Yeah.
That's basically you're paying 2 to draw a card each turn. You can start drawing cards. All you got to do is tap it at that point.
Exactly.
It's a great, great value. Another great card draw spell is Inspiring Call. It's 2 and a green for an instant. It just says draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. And those creatures also gain indestructible until end of turn.
So this is in both categories. It's in protection as well, because of course it gives everything indestructible. Yeah, that's fantastic. And then also you just have to draw a bunch of cards on the same card. Yeah. So I have a lot of cards in the deck that will be playing double duty. Not only is it great for the game plan, and then also gives you some benefit, but this one's one of those ones that's great for the game plan. Gives you 2 extra benefits, both the protection and the card draw.
It's a great. I think Inspiring Call. You have to. If any deck you got, most +1/+1 counter decks are in green anyways. This card is one of those must includes. Just to be able to draw that many cards and get indestructible for that turn at instant speed. That's pretty nuts.
It's fantastic.
Pretty nuts. Another great card, fun card too, is Toothy. Imaginary Friend is 3 and a blue for a legendary creature, Illusion. You can partner it with Peer, Imaginative Rascal. So if you have a partner, the way that partner works is if you have that other card in your deck, once you play this, you get and pull that card out and put it in your hand so you can play it next turn or that turn. So Toothy says whenever you draw a card, you put a +1/+1 counter on Toothy, Imaginary Friend. And when Toothy leaves the battlefield, you draw a card for each +1/+1 counter on it. It's a 1/1.
So this will draw you a lot of cards out of nowhere. I have a number of cards in the deck that are tied to +1/+1 counter. Same with Ramp, I had to kind of lower it down. I don't actually have Peer in the deck. There was a point where it was in there. I decided to pull it out because it only really helps my creatures, which is the main point of the deck. But I decided I wasn't getting quite enough of a benefit against some extra proliferators and stuff like that. So it's been pulled out. I still have Toothy because it's such a great draw card engine that I decided just leave it in.
You've broke the partners apart.
I did. I broke the partners apart.
But if that's what the deck calls for, that's what it calls for. This next card, really great too, is Fathom Mage. It's 2, a green and a blue for a creature human wizard. It's got Evolve. So whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if that creature has greater power or toughness than this creature, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And then whenever a +1/+1 counter is placed on Fathom Mage, you may draw a card.
Exactly.
1/1.
Just a great draw engine. Of course, whenever I'm proliferating, I'm getting to draw extra cards. And if I, throw enough on there, I mean, all of a sudden I'm drawing 7, 8 cards in a turn easy. It's a little powerful. Surprised me how powerful it was.
That one shocked you a little bit. Yeah, these cards allow you to draw for +1/+1 counters, and there's a lot of options there. They're just wonderful cards to have in the deck. Because I notice, because you have so many of them, and they're all so really good on their own, you always got one out. And I think that's having those out, being able to fuel your game plan is key.
This deck does a great job of recovering from a board wipe. You would think it's a little susceptible to it. I have a couple of ways to protect it, but mostly it's going to just take the board wipe and come right back swinging, full force. And at this point, you see how many cards I can draw with the deck.
Yeah.
You'll have the mana base really roaring. I mean, it's one of those ones. It just gets out of hand real fast.
Yes. And that's the kind of fuel you need for this deck. Let's just talk about one card for our best synergistic single target removal. You have about 5 or so, right?
I think I'm at 5 or no, I think it's around 5 for single target removal in the deck. Most of them aren't terribly synergistic to the deck. They're just efficient removal spells. I lean a little bit more towards exile in the deck based on the colors.
Yeah.
But this is just the one that happens to also help out the deck strategy.
And that card is Fuel for the Cause. It's 2 blue and a blue for an instant. It says counter target spell, then proliferate.
Straightforward. It's a counter spell. It also proliferates everything.
Yes.
It just helps out the strategy, and then happens to be a counter spell.
Yeah. And I think that, you have a lot of these exile effects, and having the ability to counter is also really fun too. And it is a form of removal that blue uses. So you got so many colors in this. The only color you don't have is red, right?
Yes.
You basically just can't burn people. But those exile effects you have for permanents, and then that gives you balance. And if your play group likes to play a little bit more counter or not counter, play it that way. But the proliferate on this too, to be able to counter and then proliferate.
Exactly. And if you're playing blue, I recommend having at least a counter spell or 2 in the deck, depending on how competitive your play group is or how frustrated they're going to get by it. Adjust accordingly. I think this deck has a little bit less because it doesn't need it as much, but it has a few just because there's some things only a counter spell can deal with.
I think the decks I have blue, I think I want at least, I have about at least 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Because I like to be able to, I like that ability to interact with the board, right?
Again, there's certain things that only a counter spell will deal with. Some things, once they're on the field, it's too late already.
Exactly.
And you have to have that counter spell.
And then one of your best synergistic board wipe. Again, there's about, 5 wipes in here or so?
Yeah, there's about 5, I believe. I think it's actually dead on. And the Contagion, the one you're about to talk about, Contagion Engine, is the one that's probably the least board wipey, but it becomes very board wipe-esque based on having Atraxa in the deck.
Nice. So Contagion Engine is 6 generic mana for an artifact. Then when Contagion Engine enters the battlefield, you put a -1/-1 counter on each creature target player controls. And for 4 and tap, you can proliferate, then proliferate again. So this is great because it's not necessarily a huge board wipe, but you can wipe somebody's board, right?
Exactly. You can aim at a specific player if they're giving you grievance or trouble, right? So it does have that board wipe element to it, except on a single player. But the main thing is it just helps out the overall strategy with the proliferate, then proliferate again. For 4 mana, you proliferate twice, right? That's a fantastic rate at the cost of Atraxa in its entirety. So that's fantastic as is. And then if you happen to also board wipe a single player at the same time, it's pretty ideal.
Yeah, and even if on the turn you play this, you're not wiping that guy out. You're putting a bunch of -1 counters on all of his things, right? As I say, on all of his creatures.
Yeah.
With the way we've been seeing this deck likes to proliferate, you're going to be eventually knocking that guy out. If not that turn, the next turn come around.
Honestly, if you're able to play Contagion Engine, you're going to either take out most of their stuff the turn it comes into play. Sometimes you have to wait an extra turn, but honestly, it's one of those things that it just gets out of hand just because of the proliferate again. People want to remove it.
If you want to be really nasty, put a card in here or 2 that can blink it, and you can blink it.
Yes, exactly.
And hit -1 counters on other people. But we're not. This is not a -1/-1 counter deck.
No,
this
it's
is
not. It has 1 or 2
1.
things that do -1 counters, but it's not the real goal of the deck. It just happens to also have a couple little things.
I personally feel it's more fun that way, being a +1, because I feel like, I don't know, for me personally, the infect thing is a little bit. It just feels a little nasty. But the +1/+1 or doing -1/-1, I think that's the more fun way to do it.
I completely agree. In fact, it's a little bit hard. I don't think it's overpowered or anything. I think they generally lose at the table more often than not because everyone needs to take them out. But what is true is I don't mind the -1/-1 counter things. It's actually a little bit slower than just destroy things, right? So that one doesn't bother as much. It's the infect counters.
Yeah, exactly. Because that can just wipe your board or hurt you, but the infect is just die after 10 times.
Exactly.
Proliferate, which this one will do fast. And then we'll talk about our best synergistic recursion and protection plan. So I think we'll...
No.
I got them backwards.
It's okay. You can do it either
backwards. Let's talk about Cauldron of Souls. It's 5 generic mana for an artifact. And you tap it and choose any number of target creatures, and each of those creatures gains Persist until end of turn. Persist is when it dies, if it had no -1/-1 counters on it, return it to the battlefield under its owner control with a -1/-1 counter on it.
So this is a nice little cool thing with the rules, why this card's in the deck. It protects your whole board because you can just tap it and save everything in play, right?
Yes.
They just come right back to the field. It's us, they didn't mind it, but they do lose all their +1/+1 counters, which does affect the deck, right? This one, they come with the -1/-1 counters, but how the rules say is I have so many things in the deck that get +1/+1 counters.
Yes.
And if you give a +1/+1 counter to something with a -1 counter, then they just wipe each other out. It goes back to being normal. So all it takes is just one thing to put a +1/+1 counter on it. Then all of a sudden they're right back to having no counters again, no -1.
And you can start proliferating them upwards.
Exactly. You can throw some more +1/+1 counters on them, get them more proliferation. Or again, you can keep on using Cauldron of Souls repeatedly, and that you can protect yourself that way.
And so us newer players understand with a -1/-1 counter on a creature, you can't. If you proliferate that, it's going to become a -2/-2.
Yes.
It's not like you can proliferate it backwards and remove the -1 and make it a 0 or something.
Yeah.
It wants to add one more of the counter that exists on that thing.
Exactly. And again, the reason why it cancels each other out, because instead of having both -1 counters on it and +1/+1 counters, they just, in the rules, it cancels each other out. You remove both counters, and then it's back to having no counters.
No counters at all. Nice. And then another really good recursion card that you have here, which also can kind of be board wipey, is a great dual card. It's Find and Finality. So the Find side is a Golgari, so it's black, green. For a sorcery, it says return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. And the Finality side is 4 black and a green for a sorcery that you may put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature you control, and then all creatures get -4/-4 until end of turn.
Exactly. So this hits the board wipe requirement. It adds +1/+1 counters, a thing, which is why it's synergistic. But honestly, why I put it in this category instead of the other one is you generally use the Find side. Honestly, this deck probably has a little bit lower than I'd like on most decks I build nowadays on the recursion side of things. But it does have this in there as something that you can yank it back with.
I find this is a card you put in a lot of decks. It's really, I think, might be a bit underrated.
I think it's heavily underrated. For the price it is, it's flexible, which is such things that we look at. And honestly, the more decks we're building together, Joel, for the podcast, I find more and more Find and Finality is a cheap, really efficient card that can sneak in and hit multiple requirements for the deck.
Because another cycle of cards we like are the charms, right?
Yes.
Because there's a lot of things you can do with one card, and being able to hit more than one type of thing on one card in a deck kind of almost in a way kind of makes it like there's more slots in your deck in a way. So this one, you have the recursion side of it, but then you also have this kind of board wipey thing where it also gets around kind of other things like indestructible and different things because it just gives creatures -4/-4.
Exactly.
So it's nice. It's got the flexibility.
That is the key thing, flexibility. And newer players, I'm telling you, us older players, I don't think we realize how important flexibility is to a deck. I mean, it's something we keep in mind, but I think we underestimate how critical it is. And you can build a cheaper deck by just throwing in charms and have that weird flexibility. Then all of a sudden you're coming out there and it looks like you're a jack of all trade situations. Really, you just are prepared in your deck to deal with these odder situations.
Exactly. And I think in our play group, we don't really run a lot of tutors. Maybe if we have a deck that I have one deck that likes to combo, so I have tutors in that. But like most of the time, we don't run a lot of tutors in our play group. But I think for the most part, we run a lot more card draw and then flexibility. I think the more card draw and flexibility you have in a deck, the more likely you're going to run into the kind of cards you want to use, as opposed to always having to go hunt for that one particular combo. So I personally feel like that makes the deck more fun.
I think you nailed it. That's the key thing. You get tired of the deck list. It causes more of those crazy remember that moments that you will remember in, a year or two to come. Remember that one game we played, right, where this and this happened and this happened. Those situations come up because your deck is more flexible and because you're more likely to draw into things versus tutoring for that specific thing.
Exactly. It's similar to like when you have cycling on a land. It's like it's it's a land, but it's also a cantrip. I can just replace this card and get another card for it, kind of thing. So yeah, I just think it makes it a little more fun because, like you said, you run into those interesting types of plays. Now, we like to also talk about a little bit of alt win con you got going on here too, right? Some other win cons. You mostly want to swing in, right?
All the swing-ins ones, and actually we have a win con category specifically that are some of the prime ways to win or example of the ways to win. And then I have an alt win con in the deck just because it really worked with what the deck wants to do and also happens to be an alt win con. But let's talk about the ones that the deck will generally use to win. Cons.
Yes. So this one is Herald of Secret Streams. It's 3 and a blue. For a creature, Merfolk Warrior, and creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them can't be blocked. It's a 2/3.
Yeah, so then it turns everything with +1/+1 counters unblockable. That's crazy good. This deck wants to swing in with those things. You can just swing in for free once that thing out. There's so many cards in this deck that people need to remove, they want to remove, and this is one of those ones that's you're going to secretly really give you value, and chances are it's going to go under the radar at the same time. So you'll have this weird thing where all of a sudden it's going to give you so much more value than it looks like it can give you.
Yeah, I love that because it's stapled on a creature. It's not like only this turn there. It's like if people don't deal with this, your things are not getting blocked.
And it'll get big, too, with +1/+1 counters just as much as everything else, right? It'll just swing in and take care of that ability.
It'll take it all. Another win con card here that helps your win con out is Deep Glow Skate. It's 4 and a blue for a creature fish. When Deep Glow Skate enters the battlefield, double the number of each kind of counter on any number of target permanents. It's a 3/3.
Deep Glow Skate is just a fantastic card. It doubles all your +1/+1 counters. There's a number of cards here that double the +1/+1 counter on them. I didn't want to put them all into win cons because all of them really are. But this is just a good example. If it comes down, everything gets doubled. You'll swing in with the team, right? Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're taking out a player or two players.
Yep, exactly. That's nasty. And then an alt win con, this is a fun card, is Simic Ascendancy. It's a green and a blue for an enchantment. And for 1 green and a blue, you can put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on a creature you control, put that many growth counters on Simic Ascendancy. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, if Simic Ascendancy has 20 or more growth counters on it, you win the game.
Simic Ascendancy is that card that goes down, and if they don't deal with it, all of a sudden you're pretty much at 20 the next turn or an extra turn away, right? Yep. It's going to just surprise win out of nowhere. If you get that board lock, you can't swing in. They're having trouble keeping things on the in play. Because whenever you're proliferating, not only can you proliferate a growth counter itself on it whenever you proliferate, but also you can, when you put a +1/+1 counter on each individual thing, it'll gain an additional growth counter on it. So all of a sudden, just on 1, or 2 rounds of proliferate, you've added maybe 6 or 7 counters each time, right? Like all of a sudden it just gets crazy huge.
So if you have like 5 creatures out and there's a +1/+1 counter, you put a +1/+1 counter on each of those 5 creatures, then he gets 5.
So whenever you have 1 or more, it only counts each individual instance of putting a +1/+1 counter on it, right? Okay. Like if you put a bunch onto one creature, like let's say you have an ability that adds some more +1/+1 counters onto it, then all of a sudden it's, it'll still only count as 1 growth counter, but each creature counts as that 1 growth counter. So as long as you have a decent number of creatures, that'll get out of hand very quickly. And again, it's also an extra way you can just add a +1/+1 counter on something if you need it with that activated ability.
And that's exactly what you want to do in this deck. Okay, so those are all the categories we like to cover. So now we like to talk a little bit about maybe some of the weaknesses of the deck, right?
This main thing with the weakness is, I purposely made a little weak to removal because of how our groups generally play, right? Where if I get out of hand too fast or too aggressively early on, and my opponents have no way to interact with it, that's not a very fun Magic game, right? Yeah. All of a sudden, I have to take control of the board, and I just take out player A, player B, player C, right? It's over. I purposely made it so it didn't have too much hexproof in the deck, and that it's, it targets specific things, i.e. Atraxa too. I do have an asceticism in the deck. Again, if you want to make it a little cheaper, maybe a Swiftfoot Boots or something. But the main thing is that I don't have too much of that to where I do it. But if you wanted to make the deck even that much more powerful, you could throw that in. All of a sudden your board can't be interacted at and you're just going off.
And your window to go buy yourself some Lightning Greaves is right now. as soon as we put this out, because I think they just released that in the new set, and those prices might go back up.
Well, there you go. I actually didn't know that, so I'm pretty ecstatic about that. This is the moment to grab them then.
Lightning Greaves,
and I'm hoping they'll reprint them honestly in Commander Legends. I
bought a bunch of them, I think, for like $2 or $3 each.
Yeah, usually I time my Swiftfoot boot purchases depending on
not
when the new
Swiftfoot,
set. Yeah, but for Lightning Greaves.
For Lightning Greaves.
This deck wants a Swiftfoot.
Because
Lightning
of the
Greaves.
Shroud.
Exactly, Shroud for Hexproof. But I time my Swiftfoot boot purchases with whatever new Commander set comes out. Like I'll get a couple, an extra one or two when the new Commander set comes around.
They're still pretty cheap. It's the Lightning Greaves that gets more expensive.
Yes, it does. They just been reprinted less.
And then some easy upgrades. I think we already talked about one, but some ways to upgrade this. So it's already really good, really fun. If you're like us, like in a casual 6 to 7 power level group, like we like to play, it's very good deck, very fun. But if you want to make it a little stronger,
we always talk about upgrading the mana base. You're going to see this in almost all our videos.
Yes.
That because we're trying to keep into a budget, or the mana base doesn't give you such a big edge that you can't, play the game. You can still lower your mana base, still have a really playable deck. If you want to dump more money into it, really upgrade the mana base. It's going to make it run smoother and more consistency, which is even a little more important with a 4-color deck than it would be in your average 2-color deck. But again, not critical.
Yeah, and you want more ways to get multiple color lands, or ways to fix your colors as best you can in this deck, which I think you have a lot in here, which is great. But yeah, I'll say this as far as improving your mana base for brand new players. One thing I'm learning, because I've been playing this game for a year. I've been playing Magic for a year. I've been playing Commander for just a year. Is I'm finding I'm going back through my old decks, and anything that's a tapped land, any land that comes in tapped, I'm trying to get rid of it and find another land to put in its place that I can come in that's not tapped. I think that's helped me to improve my mana base.
We maybe could have an whole episode on it, but specifically, I look at tap lands. It has to be giving me some other benefit that the deck really wants.
Yeah.
That really help it. I've talked about before that specifically the temples are the lowest powered lands I want to put into the deck, right?
Yes.
Which gives you the extra scry trigger, but it comes into play tap. That's a big drawback. It probably doesn't quite even it out, so they're not in too many decks. But that is the power level that is the minimum I'm willing to put in, and then everything below that I want to just take out those healing lands, unless you have some benefit to healing, right? It has to help you in some way, like the vivid lands, or the fact it taps for 3 mana maybe. They have to have quite a big bonus to overcome that tapped land difference.
Yeah. That's awesome. This is a great show. Really appreciate it. For the near future, if you like listening to our shows, please like and subscribe. Tell your friends about it. We love to do these deck techs. We have a TCG player link down below, so if you're going to buy any singles, buy this deck, we'll go ahead and post it down there. Please use that affiliate link. And hopefully here in the future, if you have any friends that are just brand new getting into Magic, and you listen this far into the stream, we hope you really are enjoying what we're talking about. But we're going to do more episodes that are just geared and focused on brand new players like myself, giving them really good information on mana, on card draw, on just different topics, on the color pie, things like that. So come back, tell your friends about us. And support us. We really appreciate it.
You're stuck at home. This is a great time to get into Magic. Play with someone you have in your house, right? And try to build a deck for both your place and Commander. Honestly, it's something you can spend quite a number of hours on and just really enjoy the heck out of it. And again, if we're a smaller channel, so anything towards that affiliate link really helps us out. We get quite a bit of an emotional boost, honestly, whenever we have anyone that helps us out.
Right now it's pennies, but the emotional boost, the fact that we know that what we're making is appreciated, and you guys are going out and looking at it and buying it. It's really awesome. It's really fun.
Exactly. And we want to make content that's, really aimed at you guys, something you guys are really going to appreciate. And even though it's fun for us to do, we want you to also be able to enjoy it and get the full value out of it.
Yep. There you go. So there you go. Atraxa, Prayer's Voice. If you had the bang and the buck to go buy yourself a double masters and got the box top of this, you definitely want to be building her. So consider +1/+1. You will be less of an annoyance at your LGS and places. This is just a +1/+1. But okay, it's not an infect. Atraxa, we like you better.
Exactly. We'll see you guys next time.
All right.
See you. You wanted to do the Sia? It's
No,
fun.
we can't do it at the same
I
time.
can just do both,
No,
Sia.
we're just going to leave all this in. Okay. See you guys later.